This morning started just like any other day. The sun was peeking through the curtains, the smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, and I was settling into my chair when I heard it, the sound of sirens, loud, persistent, and close. I stepped outside, and there it was, a scene I didn't want to believe. The paramedics were at my neighbor Henry's house. A few minutes later, one of them walked out and looked at me. He didn't have to say anything. I just knew. Henry was gone. Henry was 71 years old, a kind man, a quiet man, and someone who always had something meaningful to say, if you listened closely enough. He wasn't famous, he didn't have a big fortune, and yet, in his own way, he lived a life that was profoundly rich. But here's the thing that keeps echoing in my mind. Just 3 days ago, Henry and I sat on my porch. He told me something that I can't stop thinking about. Something so simple, yet so powerful, that I feel compelled to share it with you today. It's one of those lessons that you don't find in books. It comes from years of living, reflecting, and understanding what truly matters. So here's what I want you to do. Grab a pen and paper, because what I'm about to share could stay with you for the rest of your life. Trust me, you don't want to lose this. And just in case you want to revisit these lessons later, hit that Save button under the video and add it to your Watch Later playlist. It's easy. Just look for the little icon below. Today, we'll talk about Henry's life, not just the way he lived, but the wisdom he left behind. 3 lessons that could change the way you see your own life. Ready? Let's dive in.
Thanks for sticking with me so far. Before we continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more valuable content coming your way. Your support means a lot, thank you.
Let me tell you a little about Henry. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he did speak, people listened. He had this quiet way of making you think about your choices, your priorities, and the things we often take for granted. Henry lived in the house next door for 15 years, and over time, he became more than just a neighbor. He was a friend, a mentor, and sometimes even a mirror that reflected things about myself I wasn't ready to see. This morning, as I stood outside watching the paramedics leave, I couldn't help but think about those little conversations we had, the moments that seemed small at the time, but now feel monumental. Henry may be gone, but his wisdom lives on. And today, I want to share 3 life-changing lessons that I learned from him. These aren't abstract ideas or philosophies. They're practical, heartfelt insights that we can all apply to our own lives. So let's talk about Henry, and through his story, let's explore what it means to live a life that truly matters. Lesson 1. The value of simplicity. Henry had this small garden in his backyard. Nothing extravagant, just a few rose bushes, some tomatoes, and a couple of chairs where he'd sit every evening. I remember asking him once, "Henry, why do you spend so much time out here? You could be traveling or doing something bigger." He looked at me, smiled, and said, "Frank, life is complicated enough. Out here, I can keep things simple." That answer stayed with me. For Henry, simplicity wasn't just about gardening. It was about finding peace in the chaos of life. He used to say, "Every time I plant a seed, I remind myself that good things take time. You water it, nurture it, and one day it blooms. Life's the same way." It reminded me of something Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, once wrote. "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." Henry embodied that truth. He didn't chase after material things or worry about keeping up with anyone else. His joy came from small, intentional moments. watching his plants grow, sipping tea on his porch, or sharing a quiet conversation. So, here's a question for you. What's one thing in your life that feels unnecessarily complicated? Maybe it's a daily routine, a relationship, or even a mindset. Simplify it. Find your version of Henry's garden, a place, a habit, or a moment that grounds you. If you can take one lesson from Henry, let it be this. Life doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. Start small. Simplify something today and see how it feels. Lesson 2. Relationships matter most. Henry wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but he had a way of making people feel seen and valued. Every Christmas, he'd bake cookies and drop them off at the neighbors' houses. Every birthday, he'd make sure to send a card, even to people who probably didn't expect one. He once told me, "Frank, life's too short to not tell people you care." One moment that stands out was 5 years ago after Henry's wife Margaret passed away. He came over to my house one evening, sat on my porch, and said something I'll never forget. "You know, Frank, I didn't say I love you enough. I thought she already knew. Don't make that mistake." That hit me hard. How often do we take the people in our lives for granted? We assume they know how we feel, but words left unsaid can weigh heavy when it's too late. Henry taught me that relationships aren't just about big gestures. They're about showing up, being present, and saying the things that need to be said. It reminds me of what the Dalai Lama once said, "The purpose of our lives is to be happy." And much of that happiness comes from others. So here's a small challenge for you. Think of one person in your life, a family member, a friend, or even a neighbor like Henry. Reach out to them today. Call them, write them a letter, or just say, "I appreciate you." Don't wait. As Henry said, you never know when you won't have the chance. Lesson 3. Gratitude in every moment. Last Thanksgiving, Henry and I were sitting on my porch watching the sunset. I asked him, "Henry, what are you thankful for?" He leaned back, looked at the horizon, and said, This moment right here." Then he laughed and added, "I've had enough regrets in my life, Frank, but I've never regretted appreciating the little things." That conversation changed the way I see gratitude. Henry didn't have a perfect life. He had his struggles, financial worries, health problems, and, of course, losing Margaret. But he always found something to be grateful for. "You can't control everything," he'd say, "but you can always find one thing to be thankful for." Start there. His words echo the wisdom of Epictetus, who said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." Gratitude isn't about ignoring life's challenges. It's about choosing to focus on what's good, even in the midst of difficulty. Here's a practical tip. At the end of each day, write down 3 things you're grateful for. They don't have to be big. Maybe it's the sound of rain, a kind word from a stranger, or even a moment of silence. Try it tonight and see how it shifts your perspective. Henry may no longer be with us, but the lessons he left behind are timeless. He taught me that life's true richness lies in simplicity, that relationships are the greatest treasures we'll ever have, and that gratitude can transform even the hardest days into something meaningful. So here's my question to you. Which of these lessons resonates with you the most? Is it the value of simplicity, the importance of relationships, or the power of gratitude? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if Henry's story gave you something to think about, don't forget to subscribe and save this video. It motivates me to bring more stories and wisdom your way, and who knows? The next lesson might be just what you need.